Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing well. So, we are continuing our reading of The Lives of the Caesars. It's really nerdy, but I enjoy stuff like this. So, let's continue. We were doing with the section on Gaius Julius Caesar of ancient Rome, one of my favorite Roman generals. And we were dealing with the conspiracy of Catiline, and Caesar had actually, at this time, been praetor-elect, and he ordered that the conspirators have their property seized, and they were pushed into different areas so that they could not be near each other. So we're picking up on that, okay? Nay, more, he inspired such fear in those who favored severer measures, by picturing the hatred which the Roman commons would feel for them for all future time, that Decimus Silanus, consul-elect, was not ashamed to give a milder interpretation to his proposal, since it would have been humiliating to change it. So we have Decimus Silanus and the Roman commons, okay? Alleging that it had been understood in a harsher sense than he intended. Caesar would have prevailed too, for a number had already gone over to him, including Cicero. So Cicero here, siding with Caesar in the Senate. The consul's brother had not addressed Marcus Cato. Marcus Cato is a very important figure. Kept the wavering Senate in line, yet not even did he cease to delay the proceedings, but only when an armed troop of Roman knights that stood up on guard, about to place, threatened him with death, as he persisted in his headstrong opposition. So, headstrong opposition is definitely something that was going on, right? They even drew their swords and made such passes at him that his friends who sat next to him forsook him, while a few had much ado to shield him in their embrace of their robes. Then, in evident fear, he not only yielded the point, but for the rest of the year kept aloof from the house. So notice this. Imagine being intimidated in that way. So they have their swords undone, these Roman knights. They went to the senator, and some of the people were like, we gotta get up and go to a different seat. While others were using their robes, their toga type, stuff that they wore, to shield him. So you can see how politics was a little bit more testy. Today, liberals can't handle a mean tweet, right? On the first day of his praetorship, he called upon Quintus Catulus to render an account to the people touching the restoration of the capital, proposing a bill for turning over the commission to another. But he withdrew the measure, since he could not cope with the united opposition of the aristocrats. So, united opposition of the aristocrats, seeing that they had at once dropped their attendance on the newly elected consuls and hastily gathered in throngs, resolving on an obstinate resistance. So obstinate, just like really open. Nevertheless, when Caecilius Metellus, tribune of the commons, so another title there, tribune of the commons, right? We have Quintus Catulus, Marcus Cato, brought forward some bills of a highly seditious nature, in spite of the veto of his colleagues. Caesar abetted him and espoused his cause in the stubbornest fashion, until at last both were suspended from the exercise of their public functions by decree of the Senate. Well, look at that. So Caesar abetted him. Yet, in spite of this, Caesar had the audacity to continue in office and to hold court. But when he learned that some were ready to stop him by force of arms, he dismissed his lictors. Okay, so lictors, they carry around that stick. It's called a fasci. They march in orders and they're like their bodyguards. It's very cool that he had that. I really like, that he had those. They do a good job. Laid aside his robe of office and slipped off privily to his house, intending to remain in retirement because of the state of the times. Indeed, when the populace on the following day flocked to him quite of their own accord, and with riotous demonstrations offered him their aid in recovering his position. So notice this. So he took off his robe, he's heading out, but the population, they came to him by their own will, he argues. And they were riotous, so they were just really riled up. And they wanted him to recover his position. He held them in check. Since this action of his was wholly unexpected, the Senate, which had been hurriedly convoked to take action about that very gathering, publicly thanked him through its leading men, then summoning him to the house, and lauding him in the strongest terms, they rescinded their former decree and restored him to his rank. So here, the senators, they get put in check in a way, because they didn't want him to kind of leave like that, but then again they did. When they saw the people's reaction, they put him back, and then, they told him a stern stuff, right? But they eventually had to let him back in because the people. So Caesar has lictors and the love of the population, right? He again fell into danger by being named among the accomplices of the Catiline, both before the commissioner Novius Niger, by an informer called Lucius Vettius. Look at that. So Lucius Vettius, he has a part to play. He's a little snitch. And in the Senate by Quintus Curius, who had been voted a sum of money from the public funds as the first to close the plans of the conspirators. So he got bribed. So Quintus Curius, he was going to get some cash for telling about the secrets. Curius alleged that his information came directly from Catiline, while Vettius actually offered to produce a letter to Catiline in Caesar's handwriting. Look at that. But Caesar, thinking that such an indignity could in no wise be endured, showed, by appealing to Cicero's testimony, that he had, of his own accord, reported to the consul certain details of the plot, and thus prevented Curius from getting the reward. So, this is interesting, right? So Caesar, he's really getting in the way of what Curius intended. Would you look at that? Let's see what happens between these two. As for Vettius, after his bond, he was declared forfeit of his goods seized. He was roughly handled by the populace assembled before the rostra. So look at that. So Vettius, he has to give up his stuff. They were taken as well, right? So both has to forfeit it, and what he doesn't forfeit will be taken. And the population, they're gonna take it hard on him. But all torn to pieces. So basically, he was attacked. Look at that. Caesar then put him into prison, and Novius the commissioner went there too, for allowing an official of superior rank to be arraigned before his tribunal. So Caesar got them both locked up, Novius and Curius. Would you look at that? That's what happens. Being allotted the province of Farther Spain after his praetorship, Caesar got rid of his creditors. So remember, Caesar has some debt falling him a little bit at this time. And a lot of people forget about the relationship with Spain and Italy. It's pretty cool when you refresh your memory on how these empires stretched and communication between them. Who tried to detain him by means of sureties, and contrary both to precedent and law, was on his way before the provinces were provided for, possibly through fear of a private impeachment. So look at that, private impeachment. Or perhaps to respond more promptly to the entreaties of our allies for help. After restoring order in his province, he made off with equal haste, and without waiting for the arrival of his successor, to sue at the same time for a triumph and the consulship. So, wanting a triumph and then wanting the consulship. But, inasmuch as the day for the elections had already been announced, and no account could be taken of Caesar's candidacy unless he entered the city as a private citizen, and since his intrigues to gain exemption from the laws met with general protest. he was forced to forego the triumph to avoid losing the consulship. So they were like, hey, Caesar, if you want to run for that position of consulship, you cannot have your triumph. And having your triumph parade was pretty important for every young Roman politician at that time. It's something that you really, really want. It really brings you some set of prestige and glory, right? Of the two other candidates for this office, Lucius Leccius and Marcus Bibulus, Caesar joined forces with the former, so Lucius, making a bargain with him that since Lucius had less influence, the former, I think they got that wrong. I think Bibulus was the one he went with, but more funds, he should in their common name promise largesse to the electors. So promise largesse to the electors from his own pocket. So that sounds like bribery to me. When this became known, the aristocracy authorized Bibulus to promise the same amount, being seized with fear that Caesar would stick at nothing when he became chief magistrate. So notice all the titles here, right? Chief magistrate. We have the tribune of the commons. We have praetorship. I mean, these titles are important because everyone seems to be coveting such prestigious positions at this time period. If he had a colleague who was heart and soul with him, many of them contributed to the fund, and even Cato did not deny that bribery under such circumstances was for the good of the commonwealth. Okay, so yes, it is essentially bribery. Now, this is interesting. The commonwealth. Cato was an enemy of Caesar until death, right? He really did not like the aims of Caesar. And this idea of, is it good to bribe if it leads to the good of the whole? Is that a ends justify the means argument? Really makes you wonder. Really makes you wonder. So Caesar was chosen consul with Bibulus. With the same motives, the aristocracy took care the provinces of the smallest importance should be assigned to the newly elected consuls. So that seems like a little bit of a slight in a way. So the aristocrats, they gave the small, like, least territories, not too magnificent in stature and record, to be given to Bibulus and Caesar. So you can feel by this point the relationship between Caesar and the Senate, right? The aristocracy and Caesar. That is mere woods and pastures. So they gave it's also like, here's some pastures and some woods. A little bit of an insult, because when you represent, right? What are you representing? So, everybody wants to kind of be the leader of a very nice province or an area, right? Thereupon Caesar, especially incensed by this slight, Caesar took it as a slight, by every possible attention, courted the goodwill of Gnaeus Pompeius. So another person, Gnaeus Pompeius. Remember, we had Cicero, we have Cato, we have Bibulus, we have Quintus Catulus, Caecilius Metellus, okay? Novius Niger, Quintus Curius, Lucius Vettius, I love Latin names, who was at odds with the Senate because of his tardiness in ratifying his acts after his victory over King Mithridates. So another figure, King Mithridates. So he was in trouble with the Senate because he was a little bit procrastination when it came to ratifying his acts. So that's kind of funny. There's like a complaint there. A little bit of laziness, He also patched up peace between Pompeius and Marcus Crassus, who had been enemies since their consulship. So here you go. You have another one, Marcus Crassus, which had been one of the constant wrangling. Then he made a compact to win both of them, that no step should be taken in public affairs which did not suit any one of the three. Okay, so in order to do anything, it appears that these three would want to have like their agreement laid down. Really a sense of teamwork going on there. King Mithridates, you know, that one is another common one in history that I wish we had more information on. So Caesar, clearly, we can see that, you know, he is fighting for his position, right? He's done a little plotting, a little bribery. He has lictors. He is willing to butt heads with who he has to butt heads with. Cicero, you know, he's highly respected. But you can also see the nuanced relationship between Caesar and Cicero, even at this stage, according to Suetonius, right? And obviously Suetonius is giving us his perspective, but it's still very interesting to read about thousands of years later.